A woman waited 16 years to speak. 16 years of silence. 16 years of carrying something that she says.
He pulls me onto his lap, takes my shirt off, and sexual boundaries are crossed again.
And when she finally did speak, Bethel Church's first response was to defend the man she was accusing. Something has been happening at Bethel Church, and what it reveals about a much bigger problem inside institutional Christianity. Ben Armstrong is, or was, the prophetic ministry director at Bethel Church in Redding, California. He also served as a pastor at BSSM Bethel School of Supernatural Ministry, one of the most influential charismatic ministry training programs in the world. On February 13th, a YouTube video was published by the Wake Up and Win podcast. In it, a woman identified only as Sarah gave a nearly 2-hour interview detailing what she says was clergy SA by Armstrong, dating back to 2009, when she was a 23-year-old intern and student at BSSM.
He's going to see me, and then he comes back in from the bathroom and starts touching me inappropriately, and I remember completely freezing.
And it directly contradicts the version of events that Ben Armstrong himself has put on the record. Sarah describes moving to Redding after a genuinely transformative spiritual experience in a youth group. She joined Bethel's ministry school, eventually interned under Armstrong, and even lived in his family home, where she was, in her words, spiritually adopted into the Armstrong family in a ceremony. She says the grooming happened gradually. Physical affection was normalized.
Close in proximity, even sleeping near each other, was normalized and seemingly okay. I feel fine. Like, this is a dad type figure to me. I'm not in love with this man. I don't want to be physical with this man.
She reported it to a mentor. The mentor told her to move out. But the contact didn't stop there. She alleges that during a trip to a Scottish cultural event, Armstrong crossed sensual boundaries in a shared bedroom.
I find out when we get there, we're sharing a room, him and I, Ben and I, which I'm like, okay, that's like a little bit weird. Like, I'm sitting away from him. Ultimately, he pulls me onto his lap, takes my shirt off, and sexual boundaries are crossed again.
And here's the part that should make every Christian deeply uncomfortable. She says his response afterward was to tell her,
like, old times, and I need to make sure that nothing's gonna happen. Like, I don't want any of this. And so he assures me, like, that was just a test. Like, clearly we passed that. Like you said before, that was the enemy just attacking us. You know who we are. Like, we can prove that this is okay.
Now here's where it gets complicated, and I want to be fair here. Ben Armstrong has publicly spoken about a moral failure in 2009. His framing? He had an affair. He was getting emotional needs met with a woman he worked with. It turned physical, and he repented. He went through a restoration process. Bethel stood behind him. For 16 years, that was the official story. Sarah's account is fundamentally different. She says she never viewed what happened as consensual. She never saw it as a mutual affair. She was a young student under his pastoral authority. He was her mentor, her spiritual father figure. The power imbalance was enormous. One of the podcast hosts told her directly, "What happened to you was a crime." Sarah says it took her until this past summer.
Strong memory of, I was living with them. It was like probably summertime, maybe mid to end of summer.
To fully understand and name what happened to her. That's how deep the confusion runs when abuse is wrapped in spiritual language. Now let's look at how Bethel handled this, because the sequence matters. On February 13th, the same day the video dropped, Bethel put out a statement. And that statement essentially vouched for Armstrong. It acknowledged an accusation from 2008 to 2009, but immediately pivoted to talking about his repentance, his restoration process, his fruit, and noted that no further reports had come in over 16 years. That statement reads like institutional protection, not pastoral care. Then, on February 15th, 2 days later, Bethel issued what they called a second update. Armstrong has been placed on administrative leave. An independent third-party investigation has been initiated. Outside counsel is being brought in. They said, and I want to read this carefully, "This step forward is not a verdict, but a necessary measure." Which is the right call. But ask yourself, why did it take a public YouTube video, public pressure, and 2 full days to get here? Why was the first instinct to defend, not to investigate? Here's what I can't ignore. This is not the first time Bethel has been in this position recently. Just before this story broke, Bethel was publicly criticized for platforming Sean Bowles, a self-described prophetic minister who was later exposed for fraudulent prophetic practices and sensually inappropriate behavior. Christian apologist Mike Winger released a detailed investigation. And Bethel's response? They issued a statement that said, and again, I want to quote this carefully, "We did not properly and fully bring discipline, closure, or clear and timely communication regarding the gravity of our concerns." They admitted they didn't tell the truth enough, early enough, long enough, or loud enough. Now we're here again. When a church has to release that kind of statement twice in a short period, about two different people, it stops being a coincidence. It starts being a culture. Let me name the specific dynamics that make places like Bethel, and honestly, many charismatic high-authority ministry environments, particularly vulnerable to this kind of abuse. First, the spiritual authority structure. When a pastor is framed as a spiritual father, a prophetic voice, or a direct conduit to God, questioning them becomes equivalent to questioning God. That's an enormous amount of leverage over a young, sincere believer. Second, the culture of spiritual obedience, where Sarah described a culture that emphasized spiritual authority and obedience. In that kind of environment, saying no to a leader, or telling someone what they did, is framed as rebellion or spiritual weakness. Third, the restoration process as institutional protection. Armstrong went through a restoration process, but that process happened largely internally. The victim, Sarah, says she met with a group of senior male pastors and felt isolated and unsupported. A process designed to restore the minister, without adequately caring for the person harmed, is not healing. It's management. Fourth, the power of the institution's reputation. Bethel is globally influential. Its worship music is played in churches around the world. Its ministry school has trained thousands of leaders. That institutional weight creates enormous pressure, conscious or not, to protect the brand. To Bethel's credit, the second statement does use the right language. Independent investigation, outside counsel, trauma-informed processes, those are the right words. The question is whether they produce the right outcomes. Here's what accountability actually looks like. The investigation must be truly independent, not led by anyone with loyalty to the institution or to Armstrong. The findings must be made public. Sarah and anyone else who comes forward must be given real pastoral care, not institutional management. And if the investigation substantiates the allegations, the consequences must match the severity. Administrative leave pending investigation is not accountability. It is the beginning of the process. The church owes it to Sarah, onto its congregation, and to every student who has passed through BSSM to see this through completely and transparently. I want to close by saying something directly to anyone watching this who has experienced something similar, inside Bethel or any other church. What happened to Sarah, if true, is not rare. The dynamics she describes, grooming under spiritual language, the confusion it creates, the years of guilt and self-blame, the way institutions circle the wagons. These are not unique to Bethel. They are a pattern that shows up in churches and ministry environments across denominations, across traditions, across the world. And the reason it keeps happening is that we, the broader Christian community, keep accepting restoration narratives that center the repentance of the powerful and minimize the suffering of the vulnerable. And Sarah said it herself. For years,
and not knowing what to do and not stopping it because I didn't really know how to, and I didn't want to make things seem awkward.
She took on much of the blame. She felt guilty for not leaving sooner. That is not the gospel. That is not what spiritual authority is supposed to look like. The church has a responsibility to be a safe place, especially for the young, the sincere, and the spiritually hungry. And when it fails that responsibility, it has to own it fully. Not manage it, not spin it, own it. Bethel has an opportunity right now to do something different, to set a new standard, to show that genuine accountability is possible even in high-profile, influential ministries. The question is whether they'll take it. If you found this video helpful, share it. This story deserves to be seen and discussed widely, not for the sake of scandal, but for the sake of the people it affects. Drop your thoughts in the comments. I genuinely want to hear what you think, especially from those of you with personal experience in charismatic ministry environments. Subscribe if you want to keep having these conversations. See you in the next one.